podcast of vampires. My first night as a vampire. Written and performed by Tony Capobianco. Good evening, bloodbags. Welcome to Podcast of Vampires. I am your immortal host, Thomas Wulfgang. Do you think that vampires are real? You should. Undead immortals walk in the shadow of darkness. A vampire could be in front of you at the coffee shop, or beside you at the movie theater, or perhaps behind you as you walk outside at night. A powerful, blood-drinking super predator could be right beside you, and you wouldn't even know it. Perhaps you're wondering how I know these things. Truth be told, I have a confession to make. I am a vampire. I wasn't always this way. I became what I am when I met a beautiful and mysterious lady named Athena. She sought me out and she made me an astounding offer. The irresistible woman offered me her bod, baptism of darkness. I accepted her supernatural gift. With her dark blood, Athena baptized me into darkness. In my bedroom, on my bed, Athena gently penetrated my skin with her fangs. 2 sharp teeth injected me with chemicals that locally numbed the area of the bite, while pumping euphoric drugs into my bloodstream. Ecstasy flowed through my body like a warm river of pleasure. As the intoxicant flooded my body, I wondered what it was going to feel like when this vampire drug had worked its way to my brain. The rush made me feel warm, safe, and happier than I had ever imagined possible. Suddenly, I sighed deeply and loudly. The chemical had finally reached my brain. It was an explosion of pleasure. The slurping sound of Athena lapping up my blood seemed like a sensuous yet aggressive song. I felt her long black silky hair as it brushed over my face, shoulders, and chest as she moved. I'll never forget the sensation of her skin as it pressed against my flesh. Her pale skin was cool and soft, but yet firm. In what seemed like a paradox, my senses somehow seemed heightened yet obscured. Every sensation in my body became apparent to me. I had tremendous clarity of all the details of my immediate surroundings, but everything a few feet away from me seemed to have melted away. The more excited that I became, the more my heart pumped blood, and the more that my heart pumped blood, the more it rushed into Athena's thirsty mouth. With my blood dripping down her delicate chin, Athena slowly pulled herself away from my neck and said softly, "If you think that felt good, wait for what's to come." The room began to spin. My limbs felt heavy. I don't think that I could have moved no matter how hard I might have tried. Mind you, I hadn't tried to move because I was exactly where I wanted to be, in Athena's arms. My weakness and dizziness were the result of one fact. I was near death. My vampire lover had drained me of almost all of my blood. My heart struggled to produce a weak beat. I knew that unless Athena kept her promise to me, my heart would go to sleep once and for all. My life was in her hands. I trusted her. As weak as I was, I watched Athena use her fingernail to slash open her neck. Blood ran down her neck and onto her bosom. She lifted up my head and placed my mouth to the open wound on her neck and said, "Drink, my beautiful love. Drink, drink me in. Let me flow through your veins." The first drop of her blood on my tongue was a revelation. Just one drop of her blood awakened me. Weak as I was, as near death as I was, I knew that her blood was my strength and my life. I began to suck on her neck, to pull her dark blood into my mouth and down my throat. Her blood was oh so warm as it sprayed the roof of my mouth. It felt warmer still as it flowed down my throat and into my stomach. Her vampire blood tasted like a delicious, rich and creamy hot white chocolate infused with notes of peanut butter. I sucked harder and harder to ensure that her sensational, life-giving blood kept pouring into my mouth. Never before had I tasted anything as delectable as this. Athena sighed and moaned with pleasure as I drank from her. Athena's blood didn't merely taste amazing. It was indescribably intoxicating. Moments before, I had thought that the substance injected from her fangs into my bloodstream while she had fed upon me was the best feeling ever. I was mistaken. As awesome as the euphoria from her vampire bite was, it paled in comparison to this new euphoria. Her blood gave me pure ecstasy. While the vampire's bite had sent a warm river through my bloodstream, ingesting her vampire blood had unleashed a tsunami of euphoria throughout my whole body. I felt as though I was swimming into the moonlit sky. Not even mortal lovemaking could rival this magical experience. No type or amount of alcohol, nor any drug, could even approximate the unbridled and unadulterated pleasure caused by her dark blood. Athena calls it the blessing of dark euphoria. Athena and I floated to the ceiling as we shared our eternal embrace. As her mouth-watering blood flowed into my mouth, the world disappeared. Everything around us faded away until only the two of us remained. For those precious moments, we were the entire universe. I held infinity in my arms, and her name was Athena. I longed to stay in those moments forever. With my lips latched to her seductive throat, I drank and drank. As I drank her essence into me, I grew more and more inebriated. The pleasure was so immense that it overwhelmed me. It was like a supernova of pure euphoria and joy. Unable to sustain this acute experience any longer, my heart pounded like a drummer performing an epic drum solo. Then, my life flashed before my eyes. I saw my mom and dad as they put me to bed in my crib. Next, along with my dad, I was at our very first house as it was being constructed. I smelled the fresh paint and I felt the joy and excitement of anticipating moving into our new home. Then I was in elementary school and I could smell that the classroom had taken on the smell of lunchboxes filled with sandwiches and snacks. Half a moment later, I was sitting at my family's kitchen table on Christmas Eve. The table was filled with family members that had long since passed away. Like a dream, I was next taken to the moment that I shared my first kiss with a girl named Stacy. Next, I was at the first party that I had ever been to. It was the first time that I had gotten drunk. Finally, I saw a tunnel with a brilliant light at the end of it, and as I began to walk down the tunnel, darkness enveloped me. Everything went black. I had died. Athena told me that I had been dead for 13 minutes. When I opened my eyes again, my world had changed. The first thing that I saw was Athena. Through my vampire eyes, she looked even more beautiful. Her pale blue eyes appeared more vivid and more vibrant. Her pale, smooth skin was perfect. I could see the tiniest details in her dark hair. It seemed as though I was seeing her as she truly was for the very first time. I desired to study her for hours, but I knew that there would be plenty of time to do that in the future. Now it was time to explore the world with my brand new vampire eyes. The flickering candle on the end table beside my bed captivated me. I saw additional colors that I had never seen before, and I didn't even have names for them. The light of the candle was far brighter than it had ever appeared to my human eyes. The dancing flame seemed mystical, almost spiritual. Often had I wondered what it would be like to see the world through someone else's eyes. I had even pondered what it would be like to see the world as a cat sees it, or as a bird sees it. Never did I think I'd ever actually be able to see the world apart from my eyes and the eyes of my imagination. Now, after my baptism into darkness, I was remarkably able to see the world through different eyes, through my new vampiric eyes. It was glorious. Things were similar yet different. It was as though a veil had been lifted, and for the very first time, I could see things as they really were. The Tuesday night in November, when I was blessed with the baptism of darkness, happened to be the night of the blood moon. Athena suggested that we go outside to look upon the blood moon, so that I could witness it with my new dark sight. We went up to the roof of my apartment building to view it. As the lunar eclipse began, a beautiful red glow started to appear on the moon. The red color was fuller and sharper than any shade of red that I had ever seen in the past. I could see details in the moon that I would have required a telescope to see when I was mortal. The beauty of the lunar eclipse was astounding. Athena held my hand as we watched this spectacle of nature. A fireball streaked through the sky. It was a shooting star. My dark eyes could not only see the red of the streak in greater detail, but they could also track the movement in a superior way. The fine detail of each particle of light looked as though hundreds of fiery fairies were racing through the black sky. The night was getting very late, and the break of dawn was drawing near. Athena suggested that I go with her to her place to sleep. She had an extra coffin for me to sleep in, and she insisted that it would be safer for me to sleep the day away with her. I agreed. As we walked away from my apartment to her house, I noticed how much better I could see at night. We had no need for a flashlight. We could see everything perfectly well. With our vampire sight, the nighttime was no longer a black blanket throughout which nothing could be seen. Rather than total darkness, we saw a soft light that surrounded everything. Once again, I was astonished. I could see the true beauty of the night. The darkness was no longer something for me to fear. I came to perceive that darkness wasn't the black void that I had been conditioned to believe that it was. Darkness is often associated with death, but for me, it brought life eternal. People often associate darkness with pain and suffering, but for me, it brought pleasure, comfort, and healing. As Athena and I walked in the darkness, I observed something miraculous. The terrible skin disease that afflicted me since puberty was gone. Hidradenitis suppurativa, or HS, is the name of the rare but vile skin disease that I had suffered from. It is an inflammatory skin condition that often produces lumps and boils, some of which never heal. It is a painful affliction that causes physical, social, and mental suffering. I, like many others with HS, had kept it private. It is not the kind of illness that I or anyone else wants to talk about. It's one thing to talk about asthma, stomach disorders, immune disorders, or various other internal illnesses, but it's quite another thing to speak about HS. At times in the past, I would yell at God in anger, shame, and frustration. I had prayed unceasingly for him to take the HS away from me, and it was a prayer that he never answered. Tormented and exhausted, I'd cry out about how boils were a punishment that the Bible says God sent upon the Egyptians as punishment in the story of Moses. I lashed out about how I was suffering one of the 10 plagues of Egypt. But my torment was far worse, because HS is a lifelong illness with no known cure. In the book of Exodus, there was a reason for the suffering, and I'd ask God why I deserved this biblical plague. Living with HS, if indeed you can call it living at all, is at times terribly physically painful, but always psychologically and spiritually agonizing. We who suffer from HS often live our lives in isolation. The symptoms of the sickness aren't something that people would be likely to share unless it was part of a horror story, maybe even a body horror story. Infected hair follicles become inflamed and, in acute cases, can transform into baseball-sized boils filled with putrid pus. The skin is then stretched to such an extreme extent that the pain becomes absolutely excruciating. The suffering is compounded by the placement of the boils. HS often causes painful lumps and boils to grow in places where skin rubs against skin. These pus-filled growths invade the armpits, the groin area, and near the buttocks. I called these disgusting, uninvited guests aliens. Calling them aliens sounds so much better than boils or cysts, doesn't it? I thought that the nickname was most fitting. Like an invasive alien creature from another world, these lumps seem to gestate, grow, and then erupt out of the flesh. During a severe bout of HS, any and every movement causes pure agony. In such acute outbreaks, there is even pain when you lay down in an attempt to find some brief relief. When it's that bad, over-the-counter pain medication is of no use. Then, after a week or so of excruciating agony, the boil bursts. The built-up pressure of the pus chamber stretches the skin as far as is possible, and then it rips an opening through the surface of the skin. Like a foul-smelling magma, the pus flows out. The smell made me gag more than once. I am sure that you understand why I never confided my struggle with aliens to anyone outside of my immediate family. It's not exactly the kind of thing that comes up in everyday conversation, and it's most certainly not the kind of thing that you talk about around the dinner table. It's an embarrassing illness. It's a hellacious disorder that I wouldn't wish upon my worst enemy. Many times, in my agony, I'd cry out to the heavens. What did I do to deserve this illness? Am I destined to live and die alone? What girl would ever want to be intimate with me and spend their life with someone who suffers from such a repulsive disease? If you can take this cross from me, why don't you? Does my torment please you? Why did you create me just to endlessly suffer? If all life is sacred, as your church teaches, why is there so much unbearable pain? Why do you confine your children to painful prisons of debilitating disease? Why must so many of us dwell in hell on earth? Why won't you answer me? Then I'd think about how numerous children suffer and die with cancer and other natural diseases. It all seemed so incredibly sadistic. I know that my drinking and my drug use has been my attempt to self-medicate. I wanted to be numb, even if only for a short time. I wanted an escape. I wanted to hide from the physical, psychological, and spiritual torment. Naturally, when I had discovered that Athena's dark blood had completely healed me, I was ecstatic. She took my pain away. The baptism into darkness was the answer to the prayers that my God had seemed to ignore or reject for years. Athena was my dark angel. She sees me for who I really am, and she was and is the answer to my prayers. She took my illness away. She saved me from pain, sickness, and death. My beautiful dark angel gave me a new and eternal life. Walking hand in hand, I contemplated all of these things. Weightless is how I felt, knowing that I was no longer destined, against my will, to suffer hell each day. A heavy burden had been lifted. I had been liberated from my hellish prison. All of the possibilities that laid before me seemed endless. A peace and happiness filled me. It was a sense of well-being that I hadn't felt since childhood. In fact, this newfound happiness surpassed any happiness that I had ever known. I was living a sweet, undead dream. Athena and I smoked cigarettes as we continued to walk towards her house. The cigarette tasted similar, yet different to the way it had prior to my rebirth as a vampire. The smoke was smokier and more pleasant. While I no longer needed to breathe in order to live, I discovered that I could breathe, or perhaps simulate breathing if I desired to do so. When I inhaled the cigarette smoke, I could keenly sense it as it passed through my lungs. It was an enjoyable sensation. I smiled as I thought to myself, these things can't hurt or kill me anymore. No more death. The night had gotten chilly, although not yet freezing. The cold did not trouble me. Although I could accurately feel the temperature, I was not cold or uncomfortable. Athena stopped in her tracks, squeezed my hand, and said, "Come, quick!" Like a silent wind, she ran up to the yellow house to our right and effortlessly forced open the door. I ran right behind her. I was amazed at how fast I had run. I ran with such speed that everything around me seemed like a blur. All I had to do was will my body to get to a destination quickly, and the desired result was nearly instantly achieved. It was truly remarkable how effortless it was. It was surreal. I had sprinted far faster than humanly possible, and no heavy breathing followed. As I approached the yellow house, my nose detected an irresistible smell. It was the smell of human blood. It called out to me. I wanted it. More than that, I needed it. It smelled better than the finest restaurant. As I followed Athena into a back bedroom, I saw that there was a dead body on the floor near the window. A young and pretty brunette had been murdered. Her throat had been slashed open. Her blood bathed the floor around her. Two young and pretty girls were tied up on the bed. Their mouths had been gagged. Their eyes were opened wide in sheer terror. Two men in ski masks held them captive. One man, the shorter one, pointed a gun on them, while the other man held a knife to the red-haired girl's throat as he ripped open her blouse. The man with the knife said, We're gonna have a good time. A real hell of a time. Athena gave a stone-cold glare to the murderer and said, "Indeed, we are going to have a hell of a time." The two attackers must have thought that we had materialized out of thin air. Startled, each of the assailants took a step back. The shorter man with the gun pointed the gun at Athena and said, "Ooh, looky here. Another hot slut joined our party. Get on the bed with the other sluts. We're gonna ravage you and the other two whores while we force your pretty little boyfriend to watch." I took a step toward the assailant with the gun and said, "No. You pieces of human excrement have it all wrong. You're not in charge anymore. The darkness has come for you." Two loud bangs reverberated through the house. The short rapist had shot me twice in my chest. I felt no pain. I had merely taken a step back and smiled, revealing my sharp vampire fangs. Then I rushed towards him like a flash of light. I forced the gun out of his hand and I crushed it with my bare hands. I had become exceptionally strong. I proceeded to lift him up off of the floor and manhandled him like a rag doll. The taller man with the knife began to take a step toward me when Athena launched him across the room and through the wall. Athena untied the two helpless girls and looked into their eyes and said, "Forget the details of our appearance and just get out of here. Call the police." I continued to toy with the short, filthy criminal. Athena then looked at me and said, "Babe, it's time to break your cherry. Feed on him, but don't kill him. We'll tie these two up and leave them for the police after we're done with them. Now we feast." Athena flew on top of the tall man and tore into his throat. She slurped up his blood. I followed her lead. I forced the little man close to me, and I sank my teeth into his neck. The hot blood flooded into my mouth. Its flavor surpassed anything that I had ever had before. It is impossible to describe how fantastic human blood tastes to a vampire. While there is no way to precisely describe it, I can say that it resembles the taste of hot, melted, salted butter. Yes, human blood was reminiscent of hot, melted, salted butter infused into the tastiest lobster. Think of the taste of your favorite food and then multiply that pleasure and taste 100-fold. Neither Athena nor I injected the numbing substance or the dark euphoria when we bit these pieces of walking trash. We wanted them to feel powerless as we manhandled them and took their blood. The way that the rapists struggled to break free from us only heightened our pleasure. It was ironic that the predators had become our prey. They knew that their lives were in our hands. They knew that they were at the mercy of the darkness. The world around me disappeared as I greedily gulped up his delicious blood. All that remained was me and my prey. A bloodlust rose up inside of me like a hurricane. I desired to drink every last drop of his blood. A blood-fueled feeding frenzy took hold of me. The sound of his frantically pounding heart further increased my dark frenzy. His heart began to slow down. Athena firmly grabbed my shoulder with her pale right hand and said, "Enough. That's enough. You don't want to kill him." I forced myself to pull away from the murderer's throat, glanced at Athena, and replied, "But why? More than anything, I want to drain him of every last drop of his blood. I want all of his blood." Her silky black hair fell over her eyes as she knelt down beside me and responded, "That's the bloodlust talking. You aren't thinking clearly. You don't want to take his life. You don't want to be a killer. That's not who you really are. My eyes, turned red by the bloodlust, grew wider as I said, "But they deserve death! They broke into this house, murdered an innocent girl, and were about to rape and murder the other girls. Rapists and murderers are monsters! They don't deserve to live! I want to devour their blood until their hearts cease beating." Athena kissed my forehead and said, "Truly, they are monsters. They do deserve to die, and they probably deserve worse than that. However, I know that taking a life will weigh on you. We live in an age where prisons are plentiful. They won't be able to harm any more women where they are headed. Existing in a prison may well be a worse fate than death. This is a human matter now. Let the justice system deal with them, and if the system fails in this case, then we can repay them a visit." I nodded my head in approval and then kissed her luscious lips. Our blood-covered lips embraced for 60 seconds or so. Rising to our feet, we tied the monsters up and left them for the police. Then we activated our vampire speed and ran out of there. We stopped running after we had gotten a good distance between us and the scene of the crime. A 3-story, blue colonial house came into view. It was Athena's home. We went inside and discussed many things before we went to sleep. Right before the sun arose, Athena led me down into the crypt that could only be reached through a secret passage in her bedroom closet. A large dark red coffin rested against the far side of the chamber. Red and black curtains adorned the walls. A garnet-colored silk canopy draped down and enshrouded the dark red coffin. It was Athena's coffin. A large navy blue coffin sat across from Athena's coffin. The blue coffin was adorned with the engraved image of a snake coiled up within a full moon bathed in crimson. Athena lifted up the lid of the blue coffin, and I climbed in and lay down. Athena kissed me and then closed the lid. I slept the perfect sleep of the undead. I hope that you enjoyed your stay here at the haunted Half Moon Inn. The Master requests that you consider supporting me and the inn by becoming a slave. A patron of mine on Patreon. The Half Moon Inn needs your support to keep the doors open. You wouldn't want the residents here to feel forgotten and abandoned, would you? Creating quality scary stories to share with you is very important to me. Running this inn of horror is a passion of mine, and I would truly appreciate your support. The world is hurting. It needs more horror. Help me to heal the world through horror. Together, with your help, we could haunt this world one home at a time. Until next time, always remember, just because you don't see them doesn't mean that they aren't there.